Hello again, guys, it is I, Frieza700. We are back with some Kingdom Under Fire lore. So this time, the orcs, their battle tactics. So, when it comes to the orcs, as we know from the other lore video that I did, they are numerous and they are strong. Now, that being said, their biggest weakness is their intelligence. So they have the capability to do more complex strategies, but they just don't have the brain power to execute it. So what that means is that they do have sappers, so they are able to lay down traps, they are able to disarm traps, but they don't usually have the cunning intellect required to go, oh, we should probably put some traps down in advance in case the enemy comes at us. This is not typically their way. So when it comes to their typical battle doctrines usually revolve around those core strengths, which is they're tougher than everybody, they can hit someone harder than anybody else, and they usually outnumber their opponents by a significant margin. Usually it's always 2-1. It will always be 2-1. There are very rare times in battles where you will see that the orcs outnumber you at least 10-1. And in those circumstances, it's usually because the guy who's on the other side is just ill prepared to deal with it. So when it comes to the orc strategy, you know that they are going to fight you head on, and you know that they're not going to use a lot of complex strategies. They're not going to really deploy cavalry effectively. They're not going to deploy sappers effectively. They're just going to instead charge at you and attack you. But what if you prove to be such a big obstacle that they can't do this to? What happens if you're so strong, so physically powerful, that their best chance is to actually not engage you? In that circumstance, we've only seen this happen a few times, but in those circumstances, what the orcs will use is they will use their supporting units, which will be their air units, their scorpions, their mammoths, their dirigibles, their wyverns. They'll use all those to try to dominate you, so that way there's not much left of you by the time their forces arrive. This strategy actually is really effective. Essentially what they're doing is they're using the air and their supporting units to overpower you. Now they do have shamans, and the shamans will help as well. So what will happen is, the moment that your battle begins, they're going to send all their wyverns, all their dragons, all their dirigibles, and dirigibles are bombers essentially. They drop poisonous sacks that just explode and cover a whole infantry unit. Now they're going to do this to annihilate you, but your best chance of fighting against this would be your archers, and of course any wizards you may have. But this is where it gets really shitty for you really quickly. See, the shamans in the orc culture usually practice black magic, usually known as dark magic or curse magic, and that magic just happens to be anti-magic. Not only can it resurrect the dead, but it can also summon a dark mist, so now you're blinded, so now your archers can't aim for the support units, and now your wizards can be silenced. That's one of the spells that the curse magic can do, is silence your opponent, so now you can't cast spells. This is of course a very deadly proposition because orcs are the ones who tame these creatures. They're the ones who go out and tame the scorpions, tame the mammoths, tame everything. But now if your mortars, archers, and wizards are blinded, silenced, or just unable to do anything about it, well, now your whole fighting force is going to get rendered pretty much inoperable, no matter how strong you may be. Then once you're finally weakened enough, the orcs will just sweep in with their vast numbers and overtopple you. That, of course, has happened a few times in the Kingdom Under Fire series, but does show that if the orcs do get beaten hard enough, if they keep getting beaten back and back and back, and they keep losing to you, that's when their brains will start kicking in and saying, okay, we're not going to engage you head on anymore. Instead, we're going to wait for you to die, then we'll engage you. Now, I decided to draw up a bit of a battle plan here that shows you exactly step by step, usually how the orcs will engage. But a typical army, the way it's organized, is a lot like the Roman triple axis, in the sense that here you have their first line, their front line. this will be just orcs and ogres. Sometimes they'll have a few scorpions in there, but majority of the time the scorpions will resume the support line, because the scorpion's shockwave ability is considered a supporting move because it can devastate infantry. But also in their support line will be any archers in case dark elves happen to be working with them, or axemen, or even shamans. But usually this isn't in the first line. This is usually in the second line that you'll see shamans and you'll see a few other things. But this is what the main front line will be. Now the second line, this is their main fighting force. Now some tribes, if they're big enough, will have 3 or more layers, in which case you just kind of take the main attack force and you just make it slightly smaller. But that's essentially what it would be if they're a huge tribe. But this is a basic orc tribe, you would see just 2 lines. One that's a small fighting force, and then here comes the main fighting force. Now the main fighting force would include the tribe's chieftain, more orcs and ogres, but this time in bigger amount and stronger strength. Then you have an even bigger support line. Now this support line would be way bigger, so you'd expect to see 6 scorpions instead of 3. You'd expect to see a swamp mammoth. Now the swamp mammoth, though, I would consider part of their secret weapon, because see, a swamp mammoth is extremely tough and extremely durable. This is not something that they want to support them. This is something that they want to use to surprise their enemies, something to catch them off guard, something to decimate them right when they thought that they had a winning chance. But essentially what's going to happen in this fighting force is the moment you're engaging their front line, it's going to be a tough fight and you might actually win. This is pretty typical. You'll probably get the better hand of the first line. But then the second line storms in, and that's where you're fucked. Because now you're tired, you're kind of expended, or you're still engaging the front line because the front line might be that tough. And now here comes a second wave, but this wave is way stronger in bigger quantity and with better supporting units. So now you might just randomly get hit with a dark mist, so now you can't see anything. Or randomly your wizards won't be able to cast magic because they got silence. Or even worse, here comes a swamp mammoth, in which case your mortars are too busy shooting at the infantry to not be able to deal with the mammoth that just came in. So now the mammoth is going to wipe out the entire front line. This happens over and over again. Now let's talk about what would happen if they attacked a city or a fortress. So I draw up an illustration here. First you have the outer walls and you have the inner walls. Now outside the outer walls is typically a small fighting force to defend the outer walls. This fighting force is usually around half the strength or less. Usually it's less of the main army that is defending the fortress or the city. So you'd expect like around 3 units of infantry. Those little blocks there mean infantry. Brown means orcs. Blue means the defenders. Whoever that could be. That could be elves, that could be humans, it could be anything. So first off, the main force will not be here. Instead, this will be the first force, the first line. So as you expect, it would just be orcs and ogres, nothing too fancy, and they will charge. Now once they entangle in melee, this is where you see it's a 2-on-1 scenario. This is the situations that usually occur. And from here, the orcs have 2 options. They can either flank you or attack any supporting units you may have that is supporting your infantry. Typically, though, there is no support unit for the outer walls. Usually, it's once you're inside the outer walls that you will see support units. So I didn't bother drawing any. Next up, you're going to see these little red circles I drew here. This is the supporting units. These would be the scorpions. Once they appear, they usually have 2 options. They will either charge at the infantry and aid the front line in decimating the infantry with their shockwave capabilities, or more typically, they'll just walk right through the infantry while the infantry is fighting, and they will go straight to the walls. Now, for simplicity, I just made it where the orcs won the front fight, but they took severe casualties, which is typical. They will always lose around half their force from just fighting the front wall, because after all, they're charging head-on into fortifications. By this point, the main force will arrive, and the main force is, as you can see in red here, much bigger, and the chieftain will be here, and the chieftain is a little diamond that I drew here. But by this time, the outer walls will have crumbled, and now the front line will charge in with their supporting units. And the blue circles, as you see here, is the supporting units. This is where you would see catapults, mortars, archers, paladins, wizards. So they're going to be a big threat. But after all, since they're not orcs, they're not as numerous as them. And this would also be better infantry than what was defending the outer walls. So expect knights, expect heavy infantry, stuff of that nature. So usually this is where it gets a little complicated. Sometimes they'll just pull back the scorpions once they destroy the outer walls and say, all right, you did your job, get out of here. And that's because scorpions are very expensive. They're very hard to tame, very difficult to manage. So it's really not worth it to lose them by this point. Because once you destroyed this force that's sitting in between the walls, that's the main army that's defending the whole city. So once you wipe it out, there's nothing really defending the city. But either way, the front line will probably by this time die because they take way too many losses and they're tired. Now here comes the main force attacking. Now that star that you see, I didn't talk about on the previous slide, but that star would be the secret weapon, whether that is the shamans, whether that's the swamp mammoth. I usually prefer swamp mammoth because that's more typical what the secret weapon will be. And of course, the chieftain could take on an infantry unit by himself. He usually is the strongest of the tribe, so he could take it all on. And they still outnumber their defenders. So of course you'll expect one of their infantrymen to have gotten through the line and start attacking the support units. This is bad news for just about everyone involved on the defending side. So the secret weapon's going to advance forward, and by this time you'll see it where cracks are starting to develop, the infantry line's probably gone, the support units are next, and they're just getting picked off. And of course, the secret weapon will either be a shit ton of scorpions, or a swamp mammoth, or shamans. But by this time, ideally, all the defenders are wiped out, and now the secret weapon, whatever it is, will destroy the inner walls. And now, whatever is left, usually it's the king, which will be that giant blue star I drew. Or it could be something secretive, like, who knows, maybe he's got one last contingent of troops to defend the city with, which are probably more elite than the rest of his army. But the thing with the elite troops is that they usually make up less than 10% of your army. So don't expect much of a fight, especially against the chieftain and whatever secret weapon he has brought. Besides that, this has been Freezer 700. I hope you guys enjoyed. I tried to make this as visual as possible and as descriptive as possible. But besides that, see you guys next time. Comment down below what you guys would like to see next. I'm always open to suggestions. The next video will probably be a Warhammer lore video or another video game video. Besides that, see you guys next time. Don't forget to click like, comment, and subscribe. So if you've been a fan of my channel, you know that I don't really like the tabletop aspect, and a lot of Americans usually don't. And the reason why is that it takes forever to get the paint, it's expensive to get the paint, it's expensive to get the models, and more importantly, it's just a lot of fucking time and work that us Americans usually don't have time for. Well, there's a studio called White Weasel Studio. Now, I recently found them on Facebook, but there are other ways you can contact them, and I will post the messages I sent them here later on, so you can see that it's their word, they've owned up to it, they do this business transaction time and time again with other people. But if you ever need to contact them, here's their info. So what do? Well, I'm kind of advertising them for free because I think it's a marvelous idea, but what they do here, and I'll show you some art displays, is they'll buy the models for you. So they'll buy the tabletop models that you want from Games Workshop. They'll buy it for you. Of course, a little extra, so it's a little pricier, which is unfortunate, but hey, that's the reality we live in. And they're going to charge you more because they're going to assemble the model, which is awesome. That means it's going to save you time. Also, if you're just a total dumbass who fumbles with your fingers, this is great news for you, so you're not going to accidentally destroy your models. But then they're also going to paint it, and it could be custom painted. That is the best thing I've ever fucking heard in my life. So some of their art, you can see it already. They do details that I've never seen a normal tabletop player ever put this much work into, because these are professional painters. They actually make it look stunning, fucking beautiful. I especially love the little demon here that's got the purple blemishes and then has the black tips on his horns that slowly cascade downwards towards a normal white bone matter. But you can also put in some other stuff, like you can have them buy you a Space Marine army set and then put in a special design like, okay, they're all Marines Malevolent, so they're all black and yellow, but make it look like they have rust on their armor. So then they'll put little orange pieces of rust on the armor, which is fucking amazing. Now, as I said, it's going to be a little bit pricier, but on the flip side, this is saving you the amount of time and the amount of work, and it's going to save you some money on the paint. Now, unfortunately, though, it is going to cost you more to buy the models from them, but hey, at least it's all done for you. All the heavy lifting is done. All you got to do now is just sit at home, relax, and wait for it to come to you. I'm going to talk about them several times throughout my channel because I think this is a great thing. This is a good step forward for the tabletop community in America. Because I've been saying in my live streams that the tabletop community isn't really that big in America due to those factors. It's expensive as fuck, it's a lot of time consuming, and it's no immediate gratification. Whereas these guys are going to do all the heavy lifting for you. So really, all your job is to just dump your wallet and then sit back and have fun. Immediate gratification. So besides that, this has been Freezer 700. I'm out. Besides that, see you guys next time. And I hope you guys enjoy the content, and I hope you guys have a good experience with the Weasel Studio. Besides that, see you guys next time.